Hello, everyone, and welcome to Beyond the Home Study. This is a podcast for parents, especially those who have children through or are exploring foster care and adoption. We are here to help you navigate the world beyond paperwork and placement. Thanks for being here. All right, we are here for another episode of Beyond the Home Study. Laura, happy whatever day it is of the week that you're listening to this. It's Saturday for
Happy
us.
weekend.
Happy weekend. How are things? How are you doing?
Good. Yeah. Greg was out of town for a few days and then he
Yeah.
came. Yeah, he was in California and came back, so that part's good. Not good. His rental car got broken into
No.
because it's like a thing, I guess, in California. It's like they said it was like an epidemic. So if you ever travel to California, don't leave your backpack in the car.
Whoops.
But what was bad about it, like even worse about it, I should say, is that he had just gotten his real ID. So all of his documents were still in his backpack. So that means his social security card and his birth certificate. Yeah.
It's awful. I remember when I used to have rental cars for work, they had this whole thing, you have to keep your backpack and all your important things in the trunk. Never put it on a seat, never keep it out in the open. And I always thought no big deal. If the doors are locked, it's fine. But apparently this is what happens.
Apparently it matters. I know. And he said it, and I was like, man, I remember someone saying this to me recently, in a non-related scenario. They were like, "Oh yeah, we live in California, and you can literally never leave anything in your car ever. Like it could be broad daylight." Which Greg was like, "It was lit. There was a security guard outside watching. He actually videoed guys doing it, and then they tried to run him over with the car. The security guy.
Oh
I
my
know. And the
gosh.
guy, they're like, they have the license plate, everything, and the cops were like, "Yeah, we probably are not going to get your stuff back. Sorry."
Yeah, that's still annoying though.
It was Yeah, an
More
unexpected
things.
headache, but it wasn't
Yeah.
it could have been worse, it could have been worse.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's true. That's true. Well, so we are here today to talk about IEPs, which I'm going to be honest, when I was reading that, I know what an IEP is, but I actually don't even know what it stands for. So I was like, you know what? We're going to start there and I'll give you more of my background of
well, that's funny,
everything.
I didn't even
But I
think
was like,
about,
I don't even know what the acronym stands for.
maybe I should introduce the episode
So
then.
I feel like you should just introduce it.
Okay, I'll tell you guys what we're talking about. Abby's like, "I'm just here for the ride."
Yeah, I
Um,
pretty much today I'm here for the back and forth. Uh-huh. Yeah, okay. I'll just do that.
so today, you guys, we're just talking about advocating for our adopted children in schools. And so that can look like an IEP or a 504, but it can look a lot of different ways. And so Abby will be very valuable, even though she thinks she may not be. But so, yeah. So if you guys are about to start school, or maybe last year at school, you had some issues and you're wanting to know, how can I speak up for my child in a way that's respectful? How do I navigate this system? We're going to talk a little bit about that, give you some practical tips, explain some definitions, apparently, some initials. But
Yeah.
that's what's in store for today.
Yeah, speaking of working, when I worked in the financial industry, we had so many acronyms for everything. I had an acronym guide at my desk because there were so many different things. And of course, when you're in it, you know what they
Oh,
are.
yeah. You're just
You
like, I
have
know
full
exactly what this is.
understanding. But sometimes you forget that there are people who have never heard them before and you have to take a step back.
Hmm.
Yep.
Yep, absolutely. Um, okay, well, yeah. Well, how do you want to start, Abby? You want to dive into what an IP is, or should we just talk about some other
Yeah. Well, I
reasons to
think
advocate?
so even taking it a step for step back even further from the just advocating for your children in school, I think even advocating for your children in their education is kind of even a broader topic. We have both talked pretty openly with one another about what our school choices will be for our children. And obviously, we know not every family has, I'll say, the luxury of lots of choices and lots of options. Um, but there are a lot of options out there. And so we've talked about that kind of offline of what we think we'll do. Our kids are still, they're still young. So we don't have any plans even this coming school year for any kind of traditional education. But yeah, I guess just kind of laying that out there to start of our kids are still, well under school age. And so we're still weighing lots of options.
Yeah. And I mean, you're right. Like there are lots of options and it's kind of crazy depending on where you live. Like sometimes
Hmm.
you have to make early decisions, if you're going like a private school route and you have to be on a wait list or a school that feeds into another school or something like that. Um, but also like keeping in mind that um we have to think about these things in an individualized way. So, like,
Hmm.
what the picture that you have in your head may not actually work with your child. I mean, just like other areas, well, with any children, but especially like adopted children, we may picture what their life may look like, their personality may be like, or, things like that. And then they're in your home and you just may have a different experience than what you thought you were going to experience.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And I remember my parents, I remember them saying, like, every year we make the decision again. So, like, every summer we're thinking about, like, okay, what do our kids need for the next year? What is it going to look like for them? And I was homeschooled primarily all the way through my schooling years. I mean, I did some, like, kind of co-ops and, like, extension programs and things like that. So I did have other teachers outside of the home that weren't just my mom, but it was, very, like, it was something that my parents, they even say today, like, every year we just looked at each of our kids and thought, "Okay, what's best for them this year?" And maybe they looked at it as, like, the next 2 to 3 years or however that would work. But I think it just shows, like, all of us in my family, we all had different needs. We all had, and, my youngest sister's adopted, but the rest of us weren't even adopted or anything, and we still had, every year it was
Individual
like,
needs.
"Okay, let's still figure out, like, what's gonna be best for them."
Yeah. No, I totally yeah, I totally understand the difference in just or the wisdom in like taking it year by year. I heard that actually from a friend of mine who was homeschooled and her mom did the same thing because she was not homeschooled forever. She was like homeschooled part of the time and went to public school. We didn't have a lot of choices where I'm from. There's like only one private school, I think. Um, I mean, you could go to a different public school in like a different I guess it's county or I don't even think it's a county, just like a different city limits or whatever, but there weren't a lot of options and nobody was really homeschooled where I'm from either. So it's weird to be where I am now. I'm like, oh, we have way more options than yeah. And Greg was the same way. Greg had like one school. That's it. Like
Yeah.
you're homeschooled or you go to this one school. That's it.
Exactly, and I think, I mean, I don't know, like, statistically what it really looks like, but I feel like since COVID, there have even been more options that are available now of, like, I have friends in California who they get, like, a stipend every year that goes towards educational materials or even, like, horseback riding, rock climbing, like, all these different activities and things they can do, and, like, their kids started doing that after 2020, probably 2021. So I don't even know if that was something that was as available to them as what it is now. So there's probably even more options now in the last 4 or 5 years than there were ever before.
So let's talk a little bit about like why we need options and
Mhm.
why it's good. So our adopted children, we've talked about this all the time, they've experienced some trauma. But in addition to that, a lot of them are higher at risk for disabilities, especially like learning disabilities. And so we've got things like ADHD, dyslexia, dysgraphia. Like, I know, and it's okay if you don't know all those terms, but there are other things that are going into this where it makes school even more challenging, like regular public mainstream school, more challenging than, like, let's say, a typical developing child. Um, and so these are things to keep in mind, even regardless if your child is not ready to go to school yet, or if you're already there and you're like, why are we having all these parent teacher conferences? Or why am I getting an email all the time about my child's behavior? Like, there's likely more going on there. And it can be related to what they experience in those really early years.
Yeah, it's so important to keep that at the forefront as we have this conversation.
Yeah. And so if you do find yourself like, okay, we're there, like, we had all these issues last year, or, I'm expecting some issues, we can talk a little bit about like how to navigate that and, what to look for and things like that. I don't know, Abby, if, um, did any of your, like, siblings or you, like, did you ever go to public school, or was it all, like, other than, like, the kinda
So,
other thing you're mentioning?
yeah, so I went to a public school for kindergarten, and that was it.
Okay, okay.
So I did kindergarten there and then was homeschooled after, and then my siblings, so starting with my, like, 3rd down brother from me, they started going to a private school that my mom taught at that point. So my siblings after me and my first brother, then they all went through the private school. I mean, the majority of them started like middle school, late elementary, um, and did the private school from there. And a big reason for my brother to go was to play sports because he was really good at basketball and playing basketball, and he really wanted to excel there. And that was the available option at that point for sports.
Yeah, there's a lot of I mean, I feel like some things like that, like sports, go unnoticed, like, when people think about school, like,
Hmm.
we wanna think about, like, okay, are they getting, their needs met with their teachers and, like, what they're requiring and their peers and all of that, but, like, community involvement, like sports, like team spirit, clubs, like, yes, there are those options if you go private or if you go homeschool, but it is different,
Yeah,
like, which you're saying that was private school, but even from private to public, like,
for
that's
sure.
different.
Yeah, and especially if you're thinking that your child is really gifted in sports and wants to run on the track team and then make it into a great college or get a scholarship or whatever that might be, that might be a reason that you consider even public school over private just because the coaching and the opportunities is better.
So, okay, like, how do we advocate for our kids, right? When they do want these things, they want to go for sport reasons or they like school, but they're struggling. Like, what do we do to, advocate for their education and like, what are your rights and things like that? Have you, Abby, like, I know Judah is young, but you guys do like a program. So he like goes. Have you ever had to like advocate for him in any reason like that or any
Yes.
like setting?
Yeah, so we started he was in a Mother's Day Out program when he was so let's see, he was just about to turn 3 and he started at a Mother's Day Out program. Then we moved, so we had to pull him out of that one, that one was great. But that one was like, okay, we're just getting into potty training, so I had to really work with his teacher on, you need to make sure that you're asking him like when he needs to go, you need to actually take him there, like, just different things like that of trying to work with her so that she understood, like, we're working on this at home, but I need you to help me to work on this in the classroom too. And sometimes that was just sending lots of extra clothes, like, hey, it's okay. I don't care if you have to change him. I don't care if he comes back with a garbage bag of shorts that he has peed through. Like, just keep changing him, whatever needs to happen. And so, we worked through some of that. But then when we moved, we put him into another, like a Mother's Day Out, kind of like a preschool program. And he was in the group that was like noted as like the young threes. And so a lot
Okay.
of the kids were like kind of in the same realm as him on the potty training front. Um, and they really encouraged, like, don't send your child in pull-ups, send them in underwear. And if they have an accident, we'll call you. And I was like, um, this isn't going to work.
Hey, friends, if you've been enjoying Beyond the Home Study, there are a couple of easy ways to support the show. First, follow and leave a quick 5-star review. It helps other adoptive and foster families find us. Second, we just set up a Buy Me a Coffee page. It's a simple way to say, hey, I love what you're doing, and it helps us to keep the podcast going. You can check it out at buymeacoffee.com/Beyond the Home Study or check out the link below. And as always, we're so grateful you're here.
Like, I need to be doing other things. I have other stuff that I'm doing. Like, if he has an accident, you need to change him or I'm going to send him in a pull up. And I wasn't mean about it. I wasn't like overly pushy. I just was like, you know what? We've had a lot of changes happen in our lives over the last couple of months. We are preparing for twins to come. At a certain point of all this journey, my mom and my husband will be primarily taking care of him, bringing him back and forth to this program. I'm going to send him in a pull up. And they're like, "Oh, okay, that's fine." Like, it was, like, barely even a
Oh, that's
conversation,
good.
and I was like, "Oh, okay." So that just showed me, like, just ask for the things that you need, even if it doesn't follow this, like, the true guidelines, and I don't know, maybe some people out there aren't gonna like that I'm giving you permission to not follow the rules, but it was like, "Hey, this is if in order for him to be in this, this is what's going to happen."
Oh, yeah. I have definitely like, I found that both, like, personally and professionally that, like, if you're kind and
Yeah,
you just ask in, like, a humble way, I'd say, like, 8 or 9 times out of 10, like, it's gonna be received well,
yeah,
you know? Like, people have horror stories, yes, and, like yeah, but even, like, in public school systems, I worked in it was a charter school in Colorado. Like I worked as an OT there. And so I kind of saw it from that hand too. And I would say almost every teacher that I worked with the exception of like one, was very like open to hearing a different way as long as you like proposed a solution.
yeah,
Nobody likes you like a complainer that's not going to like also come with like you're like, okay, but can I just put him in a pull up? Like that's
right.
my solution. Sure. We'll make that exception. If you're just like this isn't going to work for me,
Yeah,
like and that's it, then it's like, okay, well,
yeah. Oh, yeah, if I and I think, like, even if I was very open to, like, explain our situation of, like, "This is what we've been through. This is what we're in the middle of. These are the transitions he's going through right now." And I think explaining some of that, like, as much as I knew to share with them, they had compassion, for sure.
yeah, like give them some context. Like
Yeah.
I'm not just trying to be like that mom.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've done quite a few different things and I think like something that's helped me too is it's kind of like that whole remember when we had that whole episode and we talked about like I just don't look people in the eye like when I'm in public or whatever. So I kind of have this mentality too when I'm advocating for my kids. Like have in my mind like what I feel is appropriate and then I I'm like this is I'm going to put on this hat and just like be confident here. Like
Yeah.
I'm not saying I won't work with someone. Like I'll totally work with you, but I'm not going to be bulldozed if I feel like no, this is what's important for my child. This is what's necessary. Let's figure out a way to make this work. That confidence in like when given context, when in a humble way, I think works really well. As opposed to being like, well, I think little Johnny, he just tends to maybe pee a lot, and I don't know. Like, when you come in that way, as opposed to coming in and being like, "Hey, here's the deal. Like, we've been through a lot of challenges, like a lot of, transitions, and this is what I feel like my child needs. How can we work together to make this possible? This is my proposed solution."
Yeah, and you're
Yeah.
showing how much you care for your child in that too. You're not just saying, like, "I want this to be easier for myself, so this is what I need you to do." It's, "I see that he has a need. I I know that this program will be really good for him in all of these transitions." Like, you're showing that you love and care for your child, and that's why you're advocating the way you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I'll tell you guys a few different ways that I've had to advocate for mostly my daughter. So my adopted daughter, LJ. So some of the things that we've had to do, going to the doctor, we've had to advocate for. Actually, that was a huge one. I was seeing things that weren't consistent with typical development, but they were easily overlooked. And unfortunately for the masses, you can't say this necessarily. Most people can't. I thankfully was able to rely on being an OT. And unfortunately, I think that's what carried more weight is because I had to say, like, hey, I'm a pediatric OT and this is what I'm seeing and this is what I think we need to do. Like, I think we need to get this testing done or I think we need to go about it this way. And it was received well. But again, I think that confidence instead of this, like, kind of walking in, and I know a lot that's hard for like the average non-medical parent. But I do think that that's received well to be confident, even if you don't have a professional background, to be like, no, I am seeing this. I think this isn't right. And I want to pursue more, like investigation or whatever. So we've had to do that. Um, I'm trying to think what else. So with childcare, I have been really, I've had to advocate in the way that we've chosen how to do childcare. And so this may like it may not seem like traditional advocating because it's more of like a family decision, but it still matters. Like when we would go to like church nursery, for instance, you know, some parents and some teachers are okay with letting their children cry, at drop off. And that's on you. That's up to you. I am not. And so I had to advocate and say, hey, I'm not okay with this. We'll try again,
Mhm.
and either take them out and then try again in a few minutes or wait a few weeks or whatever. And those are ways that I had to come in and just be like, I get that you're okay with that crying. I'm not, and I have my reasons, um, attachment relations and just other things that are going on with felt safety. But those are some areas that I could think of. I'm like, man, that started like day one. Like we were advocating from day one.
Yeah, that's so interesting about the childcare. I feel like that's probably one, if you do have kids who are younger than school age, you're not really thinking about that as an area that your children need you to advocate for them. That's good to call that out.
Yeah, we did that too in like a play group. So like both of my kids at different times have gone to a play group, and even the play group, like I let people know ahead of time, like this is like we're gonna try this. I think this would be good. And given this is a play group done by an OT who we have the same values, and I still communicated very clearly, if she's not comfortable going, then we won't go. We will leave, because that's like, and so just these things like being confident, being firm and still polite and compassionate and understanding, I think are important no matter what age your child's are at.
Yeah, and I think so an interesting one with the childcare, especially in churches, like this is probably a topic I could go on way too long of a rant about, but I feel very passionate about the way that like nurseries and things are done in churches. But I'll keep it,
We should definitely do an episode on
I
that.
know, I'll keep it to this simple little bit. But if you don't know, if you're going for like the first time, whether you're a visitor or you are wherever you are, if you're going to a gym, to a church, whatever, and you don't know what their policies are on if something happens to my child when they're in your care, like, yes, you have my phone number, but do I have cell service where I'm going to be? Like, what are the policies? What's going to happen? If you don't know, ask, because
Hmm.
I have had to ask in multiple places that we have been to, a gym that didn't have any cell service. Like, I literally couldn't get calls or texts down the hallway from where my child was. So I would hear him crying and go down the hallway. But that was their policy, was they'll call or text. And then another time, I didn't know what the policy was, and so I was getting calls on my phone that were, like, scam or spam likely is, like, how they were coming in, because I didn't have the phone number saved, because I didn't know that's what they did. I thought they would text me. So, anyways, it's just, like, something that if you don't know what the actual policy, or like, if you need, like, a special consideration or something, just ask and figure it
Yeah,
out.
just ask.
That's what I do
I've
now.
had to tell them. I've had to say like to nursery, like, hey, if they cry or if they need to go to the bathroom, I'd like you to come get me.
Yep.
Like this is where I feel comfortable, like, and different child, different things. Like I have said with different children, like, it's okay if you do this, or
For
no,
sure.
I'm not okay with it, so like even taking that into consideration. And as far as I know, they don't hate me. So I guess we're good.
Yeah, I mean, and I've been on the other side where I'm the childcare worker and someone says, "Hey, if my child looks like he needs to go to the bathroom, I'd like you to put my number up on the screen or ping me or however you're going to get a hold of me." And I'm like, "Okay, that's what I'll do. Great. Thanks for the information." Like, I have no
Yeah.
issue with that at all.
Yeah. Let me know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about like when they're older.
Yep.
Okay. So child's older, you're getting all the calls, all the meetings or whatever, or maybe you even know. So Abby and I talked about this a little bit before, about what you can do preemptively. So, like talking to the teacher preemptively about your child can be really helpful, in letting them know, like, hey, this is who I am. This is my family. These are our strengths. These are areas where we're working on, and these are some things my child likes. And this is, just some things like that can go a long ways to prevent there being this big thing.
Yeah. I know even when my sister was teaching in a preschool, this was like so above and beyond, but I loved it. She and her co-teacher would go and have house visits with the family at their home before school started. So they would go, they would introduce themselves, so they were on the child's level, like
So cool.
in their territory, like where they're comfortable, meet with the parents. I was like, that, like, if that could happen with everyone, that would be amazing.
Right.
Obviously, it's like on a very small
Public school
scale.
teacher.
I
Yeah,
know.
they're not doing that.
But how cool is that? And like you can create that still, even if, I mean, you don't have to invite the teacher over to your home, but you can put together, and we can even give you an example of something to put together of like introduce your family to the teacher, to your child's teacher, so that they have a good sense of who you are and who's at home.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you do want something like this and you need a template, we have a freebie for you. We'll post it or link it at the bottom of today's show notes. And it'll be a letter to a teacher introducing yourself, your family, and just some prompts for you. So, like, you'll fill it out so that you can advocate for your child in a preemptive way that is respectful, but still gives the teacher some like heads up on some things that are going on. So, check that out at the bottom. And hopefully that's helpful for you guys.
Yeah, I think that's so cool. And I don't know how you feel, Laura, about especially for real young kids, like I've seen them take like a laminated picture of their family into school with them as, something that's like a comfort, but also I think it's probably helpful for a teacher to see like this is who the family is, and and like then be able to ask questions like what are your sisters' names? Oh, you have a dog. What's your dog's name? Just like it gives kind of that point of connection for a teacher.
Yeah, I think point of connection is huge. Imagine like being in a teacher's shoes. Like every year, you just have a group of 20 kids. I mean, I don't know how many kids, it depends what kind of school you're in, that you don't know anything about them really. And then you're just expected to be able to teach them. You don't know their teaching style. You don't know what they like. You don't know their strengths. You don't know their weaknesses. You don't know anything about them other than probably what comes in like a general intake. And I know I found that so when you do OT in school, like the OT brings a child and we get some one-on-one time. And just that brief one-on-one time is so helpful because then I'm able to go and communicate to the teacher and be the child advocate in that moment and say, "Hey, these are things I'm seeing." And so often they would just be like, "Oh, I didn't even realize that about them." And that's no fault to like the teacher. Like they have a lot on their plate. Um, but yeah, I think anything that you can do to help bring connection, bring information to them is going to be helpful for, advocating for your child.
Yeah. So, what are some of the kind of more formal things? Like, if you're seeing something in your child, or maybe they're getting ready to start school this year, and you saw some behaviors and different things that you want to, I don't know, make sure that the teachers are aware of. Like, what are some of like the more formal avenues to go about?
Yeah, so the two kind of formal avenues in school systems are one's called a 504 plan and then the other is called an IEP, which stands for individualized education plan. And they're both under like government regulations, but they're under different ones. And don't ask me which ones. One, I think the 504 is like under a civil law, and then the IEP is under something else. But I will tell you this: the 504 is the lesser of the two. So we'll talk about that really fast. 504 gives your child accommodations. So that means like, oh, my child needs extra time to take a test, or my child needs extra sensory breaks, or a fidget, or, something like that. So accommodations, that's a 504. Um, there are benefits there. It's easier to qualify for that. You don't have to you have to be, so an IEP, you have to have a diagnosis that falls under a certain category, like these specific diagnoses. But a 504 is much more like broad, so it's easier to qualify for that. Um, it does give you some really good accommodations. The stigma is less, which I hate to say this, but it does matter. If your child comes in with a 504, it doesn't have as heavy of a stigma as if they come in with an IEP. Um, but the governing laws are not as strong. So it's not as enforceable. It should still be enforced, but it's not as enforceable as an IEP. So an IEP is a much more formal process. And a 504 is like really easy to get, and it's just like a meeting. You don't have to have like a lot of like evaluate. Like it's not like that. An IEP is very formal. So that's like you have to have a certain diagnosis. I think there's like 13 different ones. You have a very thorough evaluation done by multiple different people. It can take a long time. You have a meeting that's set down with a lot of different people. They often can take a lot of time to like coordinate, and then you have to like update it. You have specific goals, who's intervening. So like, are we getting OT? Are we getting speech? Are we getting, there's some other ones in there that are more like education based, like with writing and reading and things like that, depending on the age of the child. Um, there's like sometimes a behavioral plan put in place. Now it's very enforceable. So that is one thing that's really good is if your child like has significant needs and needs special education, which can only be given with an IEP. You also can get accommodations as well, but you get special education. That's an IEP. So there's kind of some pros and cons there. I will say something that I feel like parents need to know, and I always saw this when I worked in school systems. I felt like there was such a disconnect. Parents would be like, "Oh, my child gets OT at school. They have an IEP, they get OT." I think parents don't understand it's like very limited. So the OT that you get in schools, one has to be directly related to education. And every OT defines this a little different. So, like, for instance, uh, if you're like, my kid can't tie his shoes, can we work on that? One OT would be like, no, that's not directly related to to education. I can't make a goal for that. And then another OT would be like, oh no, yeah, because like if your shoes aren't tied, you can't go to recess, which is part of education.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
Y So it totally depends on, like, the OT. So it has to be related to education, and then the amount of time spent is very little.
Yeah, I can only
Like,
imagine.
it's like 30 minutes once a week,
Wow.
and even then, like, it's a mess. It's not an OT's fault, it's not the teacher's fault, like, it's the system, and I don't have a solution for it, but I just want parents to know that because a lot of times they'll think, like, "Well, I don't need, like, outside OT. We're getting OT at school," and I'm like, "Oh, you might need both."
Yeah, well, and if you think about like, okay, if it truly is only education based or like education linked, there are so many things that I can even think of, and I don't even have children this age, but I can think of things at home or like just in normal life that could help education, like, and could help your child at school. So it's such a wide variety.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's great, and I'm so glad that kids have the resource, but
For
a
sure.
lot of OTs, like, they check in with the kid once a month. They're basically like sometimes it works best as just like an advocating person. Like then OT's coming in and talking to a teacher and saying, "Hey, we need to use this pencil grasp like grip instead of this pencil grip," or we need to adjust their seating, or we need to do that, and like adapting the environment or like things like that. But they're not actually spending a lot of one-on-one time working on building skills
So
usually.
are IEPs and 504s, are they fairly universal then, like public school, private school, charter school, like all throughout, or does it depend on what resources those schools actually have?
Yeah, it has to be, like, depending on the resources. So, public schools, yes. Private schools, no. Charter schools, it depends.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, and I've definitely heard a lot from like my friends who are speech therapists that, they're spread so thin in schools, especially like elementary schools, as kids are really learning and like just so young, and they're spread so, so thin. So it is great that it's a resource that's there, but it's probably just scratching the surface.
Yeah, unless your child, like, really only needs, like this is my personal opinion, unless your child just needs accommodations. So, they don't really need any building of skills, they just need to make sure they have extra test time, they just need to make sure that the teachers are adjusting, their chair correctly or giving them breaks or something like that. In those cases, I think OT specifically speech is a little different, all the other areas, I can't really speak to those, I think OT is super helpful in schools. If your child is going to OT in school for handwriting, some sort of like visual skills that have to do with reading, things like that, In my opinion, you probably should also be getting additional OT. It's not that the OT in school isn't helpful, it is, but you probably need more.
Yeah, and it's like, even as we were talking about, your school choices and things, like evaluating every year, like maybe that's something that you're even talking to the OT that's at the school, like, okay, we're going to try to just do what the school offers this year, and then we'll check back in at Christmas time, or whatever it might be. And actually, that leads me to another question that I had when you started kind of defining everything at the beginning. So we're at like kind of end of summer, beginning of school right now. So do those like diagnoses and evaluations and different things have to happen before day one of school, or is it whenever you're starting to kind of see something going on with your child throughout the year?
So you can request it like whenever.
Okay.
So, like say your child gets a diagnosis, halfway through the school year. That's fine. But just keep in mind how slow the process is.
Yeah, that's a good call.
Yeah. So, a lot of coordinating, it's just a lot. And like, if you're like, oh, we already know we have an IP and we have to do our meeting and, all this stuff, like it can be a lot. It can be overwhelming. It's not like private OT or like where you can choose your therapist. Like if you go to outpatient therapy and you don't like your OT, you just get another one. That's not how it works in school systems. Like it's usually like one OT per like a bunch of schools, you know.
So if you are looking at, like, if you're getting a foster placement, as school is getting ready to start, and they had an IEP previously, do you have to start that process over, or does that kind of follow the child through their education?
Well, I mean, it depends. Are you going back to the same school? Are you putting them in a different school?
True.
That whole thing. And I will say I'm not in schools anymore. And so my information now like about this may be a little not correct, but you may have to like get a new evaluation done. It probably well, how did that work? You can bring I don't remember if you have to get a new evaluation if you switch schools.
Okay.
If you're doing the same school, then no, like it carries over. Although there's you have to do certain updates like every 6 months there has to be this type of update. Every year you have to do another evaluation. Like that is regardless, but if you switch schools, I don't know if you can just take the full. It probably depends on like are you doing public to public? Are you do yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Or if you have been fostering a child for a while and now you're adopting them, then how does that change things? Are you moving? Are you like, what's happening there? There's probably all
The
kinds.
adoption part shouldn't make a difference.
Okay. Especially if you're staying in the same location.
Yeah, like, if it's just a matter of, like, they were in foster care, now they're adopted, that wouldn't change anything, but if you're, like yeah, moving I mean, counties, I'm more concerned about, like, if you moved counties. I'm trying to think of examples, it's been a minute since I worked in a school system, I don't know.
Yeah, and it could be different, like, state specific too. That's we've talked about that quite a bit of, like, there's so many different, not even, like,
So many
laws,
different.
but even just, like, regulations, or the way that different systems work and things, like, from probably county to county, but definitely state to state.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I will say, like, in terms of an IEP, like, that's federally regulated, so the way that it's carried out is supposed to be the same
Mhm.
for every school, but I can tell you it's not. Like I said, like, the difference between the way that one OT interprets something versus another OT, you know, like, the law is not it just says has to be related to education, so how you interpret that law can be
Sure.
different.
Yeah, I was thinking too, as you were sharing a little bit about that, when you advocate for your child, you're also showing compassion to the teacher. Because, like you were saying, these teachers are seeing like a new wave of students come in every single year, and they're starting from scratch, basically. I mean, I'm sure that teachers talk with one another as students transition from one grade to the next, but at the end of the day, like, there's a lot. Like, their responsibility is so huge. I have such an appreciation for teachers. And I think
Oh my gosh,
having
yes.
things like this, it shows them, like, as a parent, yes, you are, showing empathy and compassion to your child, but you're also trying really hard to help them as they try to teach your child.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know I have a lot of compassion for teachers. So, yeah, regardless if you're listening to this and you know you're doing public school or private school or homeschool, or you have no idea and your kid's a, a toddler or baby, like hopefully this at least gives you some context for yeah, how to think through this. And stay tuned for our next episode because we're going to be interviewing a teacher. So that will be fun because we're going to get some other input on the same kind of topic.
Yeah, definitely. I think that'll be good. I'm so glad that this lined up the way that it did. So hopefully it's really, really helpful for those of you who are listening, whether you need it now or you bookmark it and come back later.
Yeah, absolutely. So if anything we said today, guys, made you laugh, cry, or feel seen, please share this with a friend. And we are so glad you're here and can't wait to talk again next time.
Bye.
See ya.